Okay, we're live. What's going on? What are we cooking, Craig and Sam?
Hello,
There's a big
hello.
announcement coming on about something very, very important, very big, life-changing. Let me introduce you, my guests, or not my guests. Craig, Sam, product something something in Upbound, and they're going to tell you what they were cooking for. I don't know, half a year now, probably.
Yeah, fantastic. So yesterday we launched Upbound. This is a platform for people who are building with Crossplane who want to build and operate and deploy Crossplane at scale. We're super excited about it. We've got a lot of stuff to show you. And so in just a minute, we'll pass it over to Sam, and Sam can get started with the demo. Just maybe to quickly frame the product before we get into that is we've been talking with a lot of customers, and whether companies are building golden paths or internal developer platforms, self-service vending machines, I've heard it even, companies are looking for ways to build above the clouds to provide platforms for their app teams so that their app teams can be enabled to go in and consume the cloud in a way that's safe for their company and not have to futz with all the plethora even of cloud services that are available today. And so Crossplane, of course, is the technology that provides a framework to do all of that. Upbound, the product that we launched yesterday, is built on Crossplane, built around control planes, and is going to help you basically take Crossplane into production and at scale. So super excited. But Victory, I guess let's turn it over to product and see it live. Sam, I think that's you.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to be showing you a few different aspects of the new product today. Just to start out, when you first sign up for Upbound, you get started with a free trial. This will be the experience that you enter into. Everything that you do within Upbound happens in the context of an organization. And when you first create an organization in Upbound, you will go through this getting started with Upbound onboarding experience here. I'm not going to go through much of this today, but I do want to just highlight what this experience will look like for you. At the conclusion of the 4 steps that follow once you've created your account, you will have your first Get Integrated Internal Cloud Platform that is powered by Upbound's managed control planes, and it should take you less than 10 minutes to get started here. You'll be selecting a Crossplane configuration to get started, cloning that to a Git repository, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is later in the demo. Creating your first managed control plane with a couple of clicks, and then authenticating with your cloud service provider using OpenID Connect or OIDC. So let me actually click into an environment that's more representative of day 2 operations within Upbound. So within my dev control plane here, I have 3 different API types available. So I've got a Kubernetes cluster, SQL database, VM. And what you're seeing here, this console is kind of your command and control center for your managed control plane. So before I dive in and start showing you what you can do with this console, I want to touch on what a managed control plane from Upbound actually is and what it entails. So a managed control plane is a cross-plane control plane environment that is fully managed for you by Upbound. That means that we're taking care of the underlying life cycle of your control planes, auto-scaling of your infrastructure, and maintaining all of those core cross-plane components. That means you and your team are freed up to build your APIs and operate your control planes, and Upbound's handling all of the rest of that toil for you. If you're using open source Crossplane, you've probably have it installed in a managed Kubernetes service, maybe EKS or GKE. And due to how those services are offered by those cloud providers, Crossplane users today are running into scalability limitations when they have control planes that are trying to manage across many resources or inclusive of many providers. This is that CRD scaling issue that you might have heard about. And one thing I want to highlight here is that with Upbound and our managed control planes, these limitations do not apply. So these managed control planes can easily scale up to thousands of CRDs without issue. So here within my dev control plane, what we're seeing here is a graphical representation of the claims that have been applied to this control plane, and the composite resources as well as the managed resources that underpin it. So for this example, I've got 5 different Postgres databases that have been created, but it looks like one of them is unhealthy. So if you're familiar with Crossplane, you know that debugging in Crossplane is not so easy. You need to use the command line to check on resource status or events that are emitted by a resource. Whereas with Upbound here, what you're able to do is just easily scan this graphical view and figure out what's not working and click in and see some details here. So for this broken database, in my view here, if I click into view the details about this managed resource, and I scroll down and view the YAML, I can see, all right, I have an invalid parameter here. I've put in that my database allocated storage is 1, but that does not fit with what I'm supposed to have as my minimum there, which is 10. So one way that you can update this is we've got an alpha feature that's available within Upbound today. It's sort of a reference implementation of a portal for self-service that you can use to directly CRUD claims that are applied to your control plane. So if I head into my control plane portal here for this dev control plane, click into my SQL database instances, I see, all right, yep, DB broken is unavailable, and I can view its details here and actually go ahead and edit in a form-based experience the YAML that I have passed through. This experience that you're seeing here is dynamically generated from the composite resource definition that you've defined for your platform. So that includes what fields are required here for app devs to complete in order to create a claim, the descriptions here that help them figure out how to actually properly fill these things in. And what it's doing behind the scenes is generating YAML. So I'm going to save my changes here and head back over into the console. And now expand here. And within a few minutes, I should start to see that my changes are being applied over on the AWS side. So now if I head over into my AWS console, and this might take a couple of minutes to start showing up as creating here. Yeah, it'll take just a little bit of time. I will be able to see that this resource is starting to create properly. While I wait for that, I do want to click around and show you just a couple of other aspects of this control plane console here. So I showed you the link out to the portal. There's also a tab here that's showing how to connect what you're doing in your control plane with your GitOps flows, and Craig is going to be speaking about that in just a little bit. And I can also see some settings here. I can see the version of configuration running in this control plane, the providers running in this control plane as well. Let me go ahead and refresh this again. There we go. So I can see now that this database that I created is starting to create over on the AWS side, which is an indicator that my claim is about to be showing up in a green and healthy state as it provisions.
Yeah, so one thing to add here, Sam, is at the end of the day, this is still Crossplane. It's powered by Crossplane, and so you get that powerful reconciliation loop that Crossplane's come to be known for. And so when you make a change like Sam did in her claim, it'll take a couple seconds for Crossplane to recognize the desired state change and then go and affect that change. And then, of course, once you're interacting with AWS's APIs, it can take AWS a couple minutes to actually go and fulfill making that database, because that's outside of the Upbound environment. You're now actually interacting with your AWS environment to make those resources. So there was a question, Victor, do you want to?
Yeah, there was a question on YouTube. I'm going to read it. This wizard has several issues. It assumes I use AWS, and it also doesn't allow you to go back to previous steps. I wanted to try an example with just V clusters and couldn't do it.
Yeah, so for that issue, I would say right now the get started experience, when you first log into Upbound for the first time, it offers configurations. They're starting points for AWS and for GCP. So you can do those two. And it's just meant as a first time to bootstrap your initial Upbound environment. We plan to, on the roadmap, expand that so that there's more options. Of course, like Azure is an obvious one that comes to mind that we're working towards enabling. But if you have desires for, say, you're a more advanced user, it sounds like, and you want to just get into your own environment, my recommendation is just, click through the Get Started experience. You can, we're going to work on offering a way so that you can probably eject out of it, but just get through the Get Started experience. You can pass even garbage input data. Then you'll land in Upbound. And as Sam's going to show you, you can then freely create your own managed control planes. You can set up your own configurations and be free. So I hope that helps.
Great.
Cool.
Back to you, Sam.
Back to me. All right. So I also just wanted to show kind of a representation graphically of a more complex composition here. So for a Kubernetes cluster, you can start to sense why it's so valuable to be able to visually represent this. So this specific claim for creating a Kubernetes cluster happens to be healthy. But if it was unhealthy, rather than on the crossplane side digging in and trying to figure out which managed resource has a problem, where is the issue, I could just scan this tree here, find the problem, and dig in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you another flow here within the product. So here within my organization, I have multiple control planes as well as multiple configurations. And I want to create a new control plane. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy it is to create another control plane using an existing configuration that you've already set up in Upbound. So I want to create a production control plane using this internal cloud platform API that I already have set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that configuration, give this a name, hit create, and it is as simple as that. So inputting a name for that control plane, and right now the control plane is currently installing the configuration that I selected, and that's going to take just a little bit of time.
Yeah, this is lightning fast, right? I mean, it took just a matter of 2 seconds to bring up managed control plane. So something to take away is with Upbound managed control planes, they are cheap for you as the user. You can quickly spin them up. You can quickly tear them down. You don't have to think about, Victor, you and I were talking earlier about the chicken and the egg problem that's happened before for the crossplane community. Yeah. And now with Upbound, that's solved for you because you don't have to go and make this infrastructure to host your crossplane for your control plane. You just go to Upbound and say, hey, give me an MCP, a managed control plane, and we'll get it for you within a matter of seconds. And it takes maybe a minute to install your configuration on there. So that's one really big thing to I want to underscore.
It already comes preloaded with providers, right?
Depending on the configuration you select. And also one other thing to mention too. So right now we're showing off the console because it demos really well. Everything that Sam is doing today, you can also do via our Upbound CLI. And we also actually have provider Upbound. So you can start to interact with Upbound, the environment, in a cross-plane centric way too. So, you're free to do however you like to interact with this product. You're totally able to do that.
Awesome. Craig, I think I'm going to hand over to you now and start talking about some of the Git-centric flows that we have within the product.
Yeah, sounds good. All righty, so back in the Upbound console, we're in the same environment that Sam was in. Something that we hear very often from customers is, how do I do GitOps with Upbound? It's a very important flow that crossplane users have started to adopt, and we want to make sure that that's 100% production supported. So Victor, if you could show the wonderful art on screen here for the MCP connector, and we can just, so there's a visual aid to talk through here. Great. Right. So GitOps, the way I think about it is users find their desired infrastructure state, and Git have an engine take that and pick that up and basically drive the provisioning of that infrastructure. And for that, we have this managed control plane connector. We call it MCP connector for short. And the idea here is you can install the MCP connector into a Kubernetes app cluster where your app devs live. And that MCP connector can be connected back to your managed control planes running an Upbound. And then whatever APIs you've installed on your managed control plane will become available inside the context of that app cluster. But notice there's no crossplane running in the app cluster. It's just this MCP connector. So what this lets your app teams do is they can define those simple claim files against the APIs you've authored for the infrastructure that they want. And then they can define that in Git. It's going to push over to their app cluster. And then the MCP connector is going to pick that up, basically aggregate it and push it to your control plane. And your control plane running an Upbound is then going to drive this desired state. So I'm going to demo that for you today. Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
From the user perspective, essentially, users get that experience of consuming, creating claims without really having to have cross-plane, all the CRDs and everything else that comes to it in their workload cluster or app cluster, or whatever the cluster would be, right?
Exactly right.
Okay,
right.
Let's put your screen. Here you go.
Sounds good. So we're going to use this different control plane where you've got this demo control plane. It's got 2 APIs right now. Let me set up maybe set the stage for this. So we've got a managed control plane running in Upbound. Separately, I have Argo, and it is running in an application cluster somewhere else. It's outside of Upbound. I'm connected here. If we do kubectl get pods, it's going to return a demo app that I've installed on this kube cluster, this guest booked. And here's the console for Argo. So it's connected to a Git repo, and it's syncing to that app cluster I was showing you in the terminal. So it's running this. And within this repo where my app code and configuration lives, I also have this infrastructure folder. And this is where I'm going to submit my claims. Argo is going to pick it up and push it to my app cluster. Now, an important thing to note for this app cluster is if I do, let's find the MCP connector. I've already installed it. Should be here. Cool. So there's the MCP connector. And notice if I do kubectl API resources, saying, hey, what are the APIs available on my app cluster? You'll notice it's going to return the normal Kubernetes APIs. But additionally, if I grep for the APIs on my control plane, let's see what they are. Let's hop over into here. Demo, grep for demo. You will notice the APIs for my cross-plane, definitions in my managed control plane are showing up on my app cluster, but they're not actually installed there. Crossplane is not actually installed there. So what this is going to allow me to do is push a claim here and have it go to my managed control plane. So to do that, let's say the scenario is we want to expose an API for interacting with Azure Blob Storage to our dev teams. We want them to be able to make these Azure blobs on their own from the comfort of their application cluster alongside their apps. So we need to first add that API to our control plane because the control plane does not have a blob API currently available. So I'm going to first demonstrate installing a new API on our control plane, and then I'll demonstrate using the MCP connector to consume that. So this control plane, the source for this, where these APIs live, is here in this other Git repo. And we've actually got a pull request all prepared, ready to merge in here. And if we just take a peek at it under the covers, it has a new API definition that I pre-staged for a blob and all the resources you have to create within Azure to make this blob, successful. So we're going to merge this in. Okay. Now, when we look in the APIs folder, cool, we see the blob, we see those definitions there, and we go back to Upbound now, and let's give the page a refresh. Cool, there's an update available. So we're going to go and click this, we'll fire this off. And what Upbound is doing behind the scenes is it's going to, let's try that again. It's going to install that new definition that I've included that has that blob API for me on my managed control plane. So I didn't have to think at all about the process of building my own configuration package, pushing it into an OCI registry like Upbound Marketplace. Upbound's doing all that for me, and then it's just a simple click to initiate the upgrade. And the upgrade is going to take about 45 seconds, let's say. So let's just give this a moment to bake. And we can verify that the API upgrade is now present. So in the meantime, Victor, would you like to tell a joke?
I would love to do that, but I know that you prepared already one, so I don't want to take the spotlight from you, man.
Oh no. Let's give it a check here.
No. I'm going to remove your screen if needed
Hey,
until you
the
tell
blob
a
is up.
joke.
The blob is up. Look at that. The API is now available there. While it finishes installing here, you can see the blob card is now available. There's no instances currently running. So let me just make sure that the update fully completes before I go back to demonstrating the Argo flow. In fact, if I pop over to my app cluster now, let's see if it's available. If we search for, let me check to make sure I put it in the right API group. Okay, that's in the infrastructure group. Cool. Cool. So there's the API now that's on my app cluster, or it's available from my app cluster rather. All right, here's where the fun begins. Let's execute this GitOps flow. I just want to make sure that it's taking a little while to upgrade. Okay. There we go. It's completed. So GitOps, here we go. In the repo where my app lives, I also have another PR staged. This one makes a claim against that blob API. So we can just let's quickly take a look at it here. It's, here's the kind blob. This is the API version that I defined earlier. For the claim, all we have to do to make this blob work is let's give it a name, and then let's reference like an Azure resource group to create as part of this. And we're going to submit that into the infrastructure folder of our repo. All right, that's in now. My blob claim. Oh, let me, oops. Let me do the no and just directly edit stuff within GitHub. Sorry. Make sure that's a YAML file. Cool. Alrighty. So now I'm back over in Argo. Click into this infrastructure, and let's give it a refresh. Hopefully we see. There we go. There is the object that I created. So now let's sync this out to our application cluster. And when I do this, it's going to get pushed to the app cluster. MCP is going to detect it, and we're going to create a new claim within Upbound against our managed control plane. It's all going to happen very quickly. So now when I go back here, I say kubectl get blobs. There we can see the object is now present on our app cluster. When I go back to Upbound, give the page a refresh, check the blobs, boom, look at that. We just declared this desired claim inside of Git, and now it drove this creation of this object within Upbound. And I can expand this out, and it's going to show the full resource tree that Upbound, your managed control plane, is now busy reconciling within this Azure account to make it real. And so I think the resources take probably 30 to 40 seconds for it to flip green. So we don't have to wait here if we don't want to. But any questions, Victor? Does this make sense to you?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So if I would summarize, essentially, we're delegating to Upbound Cloud Console the heavy lifting of managing crossplane and providers and CRDs and what's not. And then from whichever cluster I prefer, I can use those resources or consume those resources as if they're there, right?
Exactly. So it lets your app teams keep that simple, claim definitions. So they just have to list out those couple parameters based on the API you define. That goes in their context, their app clusters, their app repos. And then through the setup, you can use that to drive these GitOps-based flows. So we're really excited about how people are going to use this to drive interactions with their control plane. This is just one of many ways that you could interact with your managed control planes. As Sam demoed earlier with the portal, that's another example of an interface that doesn't go through GitOps. It's just directly talking to your managed control planes APIs. But there's plenty of options available for you, basically, is the takeaway here. Let me give the screen a refresh, see if things are...
Did it finish?
Yeah, cool. So all of the it's live. And this is going to turn green here shortly. The composite resource waits for the other, it's manage resource references to say ready before it goes ready. So you should see this flip to green shortly, and then this would flip to green too. And I can click into here, like here's the resource group that we created, just to show you it's not smoke and mirrors. That's the name that I gave it in the claim. If we go over to the blob, we should find, yeah, exactly. That's the idea pest.
And from the user perspective, the one that actually interacts with the app cluster or outside of Upbound, that user would still see the claim itself with the status without really necessary building blocks behind it, right?
Exactly. So here you can see on my app cluster, if I was the app dev, I can now see that my resource is synced and ready. If there are connection secrets that were required as part of that resource, say like database details or connection details, Upbound will pass that back to my app cluster so I can consume those. And then over on my managed control plane side, if we say this is running within Upbound, we should also see, yeah, there's the same resource. Now, one thing to note quickly here is the name within Upbound is going to be different than the name that's on your app cluster, simply because we have to make sure that this is a unique value for within the context of your managed control plane. So that's why the naming semantics are a little bit different. But yeah, so that's it for GitOps. I think that's also going to about wrap up the demo. Yeah, any other questions come in from the audience?
Yeah, there were quite a few questions. Most of them already answered by Dan. Dan, hey Dan, thank you for doing that. There is one that says, does Upbound has SOC 2, ISO 27001 and such?
We will have that compliance certificate in, I think, a matter of a few weeks. We've been working on it for several months. We're very close to having that. So stay tuned and we'll announce when we have that.
Now, this is a last-minute call to anybody joining the session. If you have any questions, we have a couple of minutes to spare. But be fast, be quick.
While we wait for questions, I will jump in and
with a joke.
No jokes. No jokes for me. I have a personal rule against those. Thanks, Victor. But getting started with Upbound. So Upbound, we announced general availability yesterday. You can get started with Upbound for free. We're offering a trial of the full-featured product for 30 days. Head to console.upbound.io to either sign into your existing Upbound account if you're already using the Upbound Marketplace, or create a new account and start your trial. The trial is, as I mentioned, for 30 days and allows you to create 3 managed control planes, 3 configurations, and invite 10 other members of your organization to join you in the trial, try out the product, and experience the magic. So looking forward to seeing you all there.
You'll be watching them.
I will be.
Yeah, you can also engage with us in the Crossplane community Slack. There's an Upbound channel where you can ask product-related questions there. We're very eager to see what people start to build on top of Upbound. And if this all looks great to you, but it's missing a couple things, we'd love to hear your feedback too on how we can make the product better. I know that we've got a very ambitious set of plans already for where we want to take this and how we want to transform this product to really, be this cross-plane at scale for enterprises and everyone in between. So we'd love to hear from you too.
We have a couple of questions, so I will go through them. Unfortunately, we cannot show them on screen. Apologies for that. So I'm going to have to read it in my broken English accent. In providing the dev team the ability to make a claim, how does the developer view the available API properties to use?
Yeah, so the APIs are going to be directly available in the app cluster. So you could look at them that way. There's also, we imagine, probably some documentation that you would want to advertise based on the APIs that you've authored. So they would probably go there and you could read about, those the API definitions. In the future, right now, Upbound, the console, and specifically if we click in here and go to a portal, the user that we expect to interact with Upbound is really the platform team. So this is not really available for your devs today, but perhaps in the future, you could also steer them directly to, your control plane portal, because this has the dynamic form experience that Sam demoed, where you can see the different APIs. Actually, if we click maybe a more interesting one, like a Kubernetes cluster, you can see here, desired node count, node size, that sort of thing. So that is another way that you could steer them towards in the future, once we enable that for broader visibility.
There is always, if somebody is Kubernetes savvy, you can always, in that up cluster, you can always do something like kubectl explain and get the schema of the claim that is made available in that cluster, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, more questions. If control plane is shared by multiple groups, if that's the case, how do you avoid underlying hardware starvation?
Yeah, so for this one, I'd say the onus of managing really the core of your control plane, operating it really, is now on Upbound. And so as part of our SLA that we are offering at GA, which is 99.9%, that responsibility is deferred to Upbound when you come to us, and we are on the hook for that. So with traditional crossplane, you have to think about scaling the control plane yourself, depending on the number of teams that you've got running and how many claims they're submitting. You don't have to think about that anymore directly. It's all Upbound's concern, and we'll auto scale it for you.
In other words, all the hardware issues, that's on us.
Yeah.
More questions. Let me see. Can I bring my own managed control plane? Say, for example, I have a local cluster I want to use as a control plane. Can I hook that up to Upbound?
Today, that's not a feature we support, but we'd love to connect with you, and maybe over the Crossplane Slack, if you can send me a message, Craig Wilhite. I'd love to understand a bit more about the scenario you're trying to enable there. But today you cannot do that.
Okay, that's it with the questions, at least so far. Any parting words, Sam, Craig, before we close the session? No?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, go build on Upbound. Go kick the tires. Go, stretch it to the limits. We're really excited to see what you guys build, and we believe the future of cloud is up above the clouds, and Upbound's going to help you do that. So.
They're beautiful parting words. I would throw in, if you're going to be at KubeCon Amsterdam, come say hi. We will be there and are happy to chat with you more about the product and what you're doing with Crossplane.
Oh yeah, we'll all be there. So come. Now I sound like an old person giving candy. That's not the case. Come to Upbound booth, yes. Okay, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Sam. Try it out. It's free. You get 3 control planes. And the most important thing, I believe, is we just released this, right? So what we are really looking forward looking for are comments, suggestions, right? What's missing? Let us know.